Catherine Howard entered history quietly. Born around 1521 into one of England's most powerful noble families. Yet her life would end louder than most, marked by scandal, fear, and a brutal execution. She was the fifth wife of King Henry VIII, and at the time of her marriage, she was likely no more than a teenager. Her story is not one of calculated ambition or political mastery, but of vulnerability in a ruthless court where survival demanded skills she never had the chance to learn. The Howard family was influential but internally divided. Catherine was a cousin of Anne Boleyn, Henry VIII's second wife, whose execution still haunted the Tudor court. Despite the family's prominence, Catherine's immediate household was poorly managed. After her mother's death, she was sent to live in the household of her step-grandmother, Agnes Howard, the Dowager Duchess of Norfolk. This household was known less for discipline and education and more for lax supervision, especially of young girls. Catherine's upbringing was chaotic. Formal education was minimal, and moral guidance was weak. Young men and women shared sleeping quarters. Doors were rarely locked, and authority figures often looked away. In this environment, Catherine formed relationships that would later become fatal liabilities. As a young adolescent, she became involved with Henry Mannix, her music teacher, and later with Frances Dereham, the secretary in the household. These relationships, whether consensual or exploitative, occurred long before she became queen, but in Tudor England, a woman's past was never truly past. By the late 1530s, Catherine was brought to court as a lady-in-waiting to Anne of Cleves, Henry VIII's fourth wife. At this point, Henry was aging, overweight, and increasingly ill, suffering from a leg injury that caused constant pain. His marriage to Anne of Cleves was a political arrangement that quickly turned sour. Henry found Anne unattractive, and the marriage was never consummated. It was during this period that Catherine caught the king's attention. Catherine was young, lively, and eager to please, offering a stark contrast to Henry's previous wives. To the king, she represented youth, vitality, and a return to romantic excitement. To the Howard family, she was an opportunity to regain influence lost after Anne Boleyn's fall. Within months, Henry sought to annul his marriage to Anne of Cleves, and Catherine was quietly elevated. In July 1540, Catherine Howard became Queen of England. She was likely no older than 19. The courts celebrated lavishly, and Henry appeared genuinely enamored, referring to her as his rose without a thorn. Yet beneath the surface, Catherine was dangerously unprepared for queenship. She had little understanding of politics, no strong allies outside her family, and no experience navigating the surveillance-heavy environment of the Tudor court. As queen, Catherine attempted to fulfill her role with enthusiasm. She dressed elegantly, hosted events, and tried to project the image of a devoted and virtuous wife. However, her past relationships had not disappeared. Frances Dereham resurfaced at court and was given a position in Catherine's household. This decision alone would later be used as evidence of recklessness, though it may also reflect her dependence on familiar faces in an intimidating environment. At the same time, Catherine formed a close relationship with Thomas Culpeper, a gentleman of the king's privy chamber. Culpeper was charismatic, ambitious, and frequently in the king's presence. Their relationship remains the subject of historical debate. Letters written in Catherine's hand suggest emotional intimacy, and possibly physical intimacy, though definitive proof is elusive. In Tudor law, however, even the suspicion of adultery by a queen was considered treason. The court was not a place of privacy. Rival factions watched closely, and Catherine's enemies were patient. Archbishop Thomas Cranmer, a key figure in the Protestant Reform movement, became aware of rumors regarding Catherine's past. Whether motivated by genuine concern or political calculation, Cranmer chose to act. In November 1541, he placed an anonymous letter detailing Catherine's alleged misconduct into the king's hands during a church service. Henry VIII's reaction was initially disbelief. Catherine was young, charming, and appeared devoted. However, Henry was also deeply insecure and haunted by betrayal. He ordered an investigation. What followed was swift and merciless. Witnesses from Catherine's past were interrogated. Former household members described her relationships with Mannix and Dereham. Dereham himself was arrested and tortured, eventually confessing to a premarital relationship and claiming a pre-contract of marriage. The concept of a pre-contract was critical. If Catherine had been promised to Dereham, even informally, her marriage to Henry could be deemed invalid. Worse still, it implied deception of the king. Catherine was questioned repeatedly. Accounts suggest she was hysterical, collapsing under the pressure. She admitted to past relationships but denied adultery during her marriage. Nonetheless, the damage was irreversible. Thomas Culpeper was also arrested. Under interrogation, he admitted to secret meetings with Catherine but denied sexual relations. Letters between them, however, were enough to seal his fate. In the Tudor legal system, intention alone could constitute treason. Both Culpeper and Dereham were condemned. Dereham was executed with exceptional brutality, reflecting his lower social status. Culpeper, as a gentleman, was granted a relatively quicker death. Catherine's position deteriorated rapidly. She was stripped of her title and confined under guard. Unlike in Bullen, she was not formally tried in a public court. Parliament passed a bill of attainder declaring her guilty of treason, eliminating the need for a trial. The charge centered on her failure to disclose her past sexual history to the king and her alleged misconduct as queen. Henry VIII did not see Catherine again. Those close to him described him as devastated and humiliated. The marriage he had idealized as a return to happiness had become another public scandal. Yet despite his anger, there is little evidence that Henry derived satisfaction from her downfall. Instead, he withdrew, allowing the machinery of the state to carry out the sentence. Catherine Howard was taken to the Tower of London in February 1542. She was still a teenager. On the eve of her execution, she reportedly practiced placing her head on the block, a chilling detail that underscores her fear and youth. Accounts suggest she remained composed on the scaffold, though deeply distressed. Her final words, if accurately recorded, expressed repentance and acceptance of her fate. She was executed by beheading on February 13, 1542. Her body was buried in the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula, near the remains of her cousin and Bullen. There was no grand ceremony, no public mourning. Catherine Howard disappeared from public life as quickly as she had entered it. In the aftermath, the Tudor court moved on. Henry VIII remarried within months, taking Catherine Parr as his sixth and final wife. Official narratives portrayed Catherine Howard as immoral and deceitful, a cautionary tale rather than a victim. These accounts served to protect the king's reputation and reinforce moral authority. Modern historians have reassessed Catherine Howard's life with greater nuance. Viewed through a contemporary lens, she appears less a calculating adulteress and more a neglected child thrust into an unforgiving system. Her early relationships may reflect grooming rather than consent, and her later actions suggest fear, loneliness, and poor judgment rather than treasonous intent. Catherine Howard's tragedy lies in her lack of agency. She was used by her family, desired by a powerful king, scrutinized by political enemies, and condemned by laws designed to protect male authority. In a court where survival required caution, education, and strategic thinking, she had none of these tools. Her story exposes the darker realities of Tudor England, particularly for young women. Queenship did not guarantee safety. Instead, it magnified vulnerability. Catherine's youth, which initially attracted Henry, ultimately worked against her, leaving her ill-equipped to understand the dangers around her. Today, Catherine Howard stands as one of history's most tragic queens. Her life was brief, her power illusory, and her death the result of a system that punished weakness without mercy. She did not shake empires or reshape religion, but her story endures as a reminder of how easily innocence could be destroyed in the pursuit of power. In the end, Catherine Howard was not doomed because she was reckless, but because she lived in a world that offered her no protection. Her rise and fall were swift, but the echoes of her story continue to challenge the narratives of blame, reminding us that history's victims are often judged by standards they never had the chance to meet.